Come on in. Hello, friends. Thank you for coming out tonight. What's that? I think it's on. Yeah, that's okay. So welcome to our entertainment tonight. I'm a little tongue-tied. We have Nora from Satori playing Japanese flute. Would you give her a warm welcome?
So tonight I have something completely different for you, and several of you had asked to hear about this instrument. And so I'm kind of going to give you a halfway introductory lecture and a halfway concert and sort of blend the information and the music. The instrument is called a shakuhachi, and it is a Japanese flute made out of bamboo and dates back to about the year 800 in Japan. It's thought to have come to Japan from ancient Persia up through India, through China, and then since the year 800 has been played in various settings throughout Japan. It started out as a purely meditative instrument. It was purely a religious instrument. It was associated with early Zen Buddhism. And it was an instrument that the monks in the temples used to play to help with their meditation. So I start with telling you that because you'll see when I start playing some of these pieces for you that they're really restful and quiet and introspective and relaxing. And so just up front, if anybody falls asleep, I am not offended. Okay, that's kind of what they're meant to do. But if your neighbor does doze off and starts snoring, please poke them for me. After hundreds of years of being an instrument, of just religious instrument just for meditation, as Japan developed and the character changed, we came to the era of the samurai. And at this point, the Zen monks were regarded as having just a little too much power for their own good. And so they the Japanese emperor kind of tried to figure a way to rein them in. And one thing he did was move their musical instrument out into a more public setting. So you ended up with actually some samurai warriors playing it. So this is where you get the era of itinerant monks wandering the countryside, begging their dinner by playing the music. And then we go forward another 400 or 500 years, and we hit the era of the geisha girls, the floating palaces in Japan. And at this point now, the shakuhachi's become an instrument that's played as a musical instrument, no longer exclusively as a tool of religion. Now it's played for pleasure and for musicianship, as well as still being played as part of religious worship. And we push through that stage, and you end up in the modern era, and now it continues to be played. I've played a lot of things in various temples in Japan. It's still part of meditation and religious worship for Buddhists. It is still played in those little ensembles and little groups that developed in the samurai and the geisha eras, where it's played with several other Japanese instruments and a Japanese version of chamber music. But it's also folk music. It's also played on contemporary Western music. It's a lot of movie scores nowadays carry shakuhachi sound in the background. So let me play a little bit first so you get an idea what the sound is, and then I'll tell you a bit more about it. So it's a different, well, thank you. It's kind of a different sound from any other instrument I'd ever heard before. It's kind of got a woody sound. It's based on a different scale from what we're used to working with, we're used to hearing. The Western scale that everybody's used to hearing is what's called a diatonic scale, which is kind of tricky to do on this flute, but we'll see what we can do here. It's a scale, right? The scale you get on in this flute is pentatonic, meaning 5 notes. So we start with that as a difference. And then we have the different tone quality to it, too. The instrument itself is made out of bamboo. The name reflects the length of the instrument. It's called a shakuhachi. Hachi in Japan means 8. Good point. Thank you. So the name reflects the length of the instrument. It's called a shakuhachi. And hachi is the Japanese word for 8. 8 what, you may say? 8 shaku. A shaku is a Japanese measure of length that runs from about the top to where my hand is. And then a subdivision of the shaku is the sen, just like inches are subdivisions of feet for us. So it's 1 shaku, 8 sen in length, and that's the standard length of a shakuhachi. That's the length that you can play, and it will play with other instruments. I could play with a Western instrument and be in tune and be playing the same notes that they're playing. There are longer ones and shorter ones, depending on what you have to play. It takes between 5 and 7 years to make one of these things, which is odd because it's just a dried out piece of grass with 5 holes poked in it. It's got 4 holes in the front, 1 hole in the back, and a little edge cut in the top, and that's it. But it's a family-based art form, just like many others, and the tradition passes it down from father to son. They harvest the bamboo, they let it dry for years. And once it's dried and has not cracked, then they core it out, and then they'll very carefully place the holes, and there's a whole art form for how to place the holes and cut the edges and everything. And then the final thing they do is they line it with a lacquer. And the lacquer is called G. And G is like the Japanese great trick on Western flute players. Because G is made out of a chemical called urushiol. So what, right? Urushiol is the active ingredient in poison ivy. And the Japanese, as a race, are genetically immune to poison ivy. So it doesn't bother them, but they make these flutes and they line it with urushiol and they sell it to us, and there we are. Okay. So you can spot a shakuhachi player who doesn't know the tricks of stuff because they get poison ivy in their lips. All right, the other thing I wanted to show you, and there was no written music for hundreds of years. For hundreds of years, this music was passed down from teacher to student just by ear. And then in the late 18th century, they started figuring out ways to write this music down. And this is one of the things they found out. This is one of the ways they figured out to write it down. And I'm going to actually play this piece for you in a minute. The red is irrelevant. The red is, a friend of mine thought red would look good when they blew up the poster, so we have it in red. But the notation goes from top to bottom and from right to left. So you have to read this way. And every little picture on here is a note. You move your fingers for a different note, and what tells me how to play, how long the notes are, or what kind of gestures to put around them are the little markings around on the side. So this is one of the oldest pieces. It's a piece called choshi, which means introduction or preparation. And this is something that would traditionally be played at the beginning of a concert performance. So I'm going to play a little bit of this. Now this is text. Starts right here. This is where the piece actually starts. So here's a note, here's another note, here's a note, here's another note, another note. We'll see if anybody can tell when I'm finishing. That's it. So you've probably heard the only performance of 1,000-year-old music to be played in the Lehigh Valley this week, I would bet. And after this notation was invented, and they wrote it like this, they got fancier. And it went into something like this. And it's still top to bottom and right to left, but this time it has lines running down the middle of it. And they either play piano, they're retired music teachers or whatever. The lines are almost like the lines we see in Western music for eighth notes and 16th notes. They indicate speed. And 2 lines is twice as fast as 1 line, and 3 lines is twice as fast again. This is a piece of ensemble music from the time of the Meiji emperors, and it would be played with shakuhachi and koto, which is like a harp lying on the floor, and a shamisen, which is like a 3-string banjo, and one of the string players would also sing. And again, this is text. Piece starts here, and each little notation is a note, and this little squiggles between the lines, those are the lyrics. So if you want to sing along, you can. I'm not going to play all of this for you. This is a piece that's one of the 3 big themes in this ensemble music. You know, they had lyrics. They were poetry set to music, and the 3 big themes were either the beauty of nature, or the greatness of the Japanese Empire, or they were country western He'd Done Her Wrong songs. And this is one of the He'd Done Her Wrong songs. It's about a woman who wakes up and the only sign of her lover from last night is a long black hair left on her pillow, and she's left adrift, and, well, you got the picture. I'll just play a little bit of it for you so you get an idea. So you can hear it's very melancholy and brokenhearted. So I just brought those to show you the notation because it's certainly one of the bigger challenges in learning how to play this instrument is learning how to read that. And what you do is you study it seated across from your teacher, and the music lies flat on the table between you, and it's turned so that you can read it. Okay, so you're learning to read this, and you're reading top to bottom, right to left. And there's a set curriculum, a set bunch of pieces you have to learn, so you learn all these pieces. And then to get your first level license, your junior level license, what you then have to do is take all these same pieces, turn them around so your teacher can read them right side up, and now you have to play them back and teach them to the teacher, and now you're reading them top to bottom, right to left, and upside down. So it's been an adventure. So, any questions so far? Anybody got anything they want to know? Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yeah. Nope, blowing across the hole again. It's just vertical, and I'm blowing across the hole, and there's a blowing edge right here that has the same function as the edge on the embouchure hole of a Western flute. In fact, I hold mine as if it were a Western flute, with my left hand on the top, because if it were a Western flute, I would have my left hand there. But it's perfectly okay as far as the Japanese are concerned. You can play with either hand on the top, it doesn't matter. Yeah. This instrument was made in about 1930. And it was made, the makers put their mark, a hash mark, they burn into the violin, into the wood of the bamboo if they are satisfied with they'll claim they made this instrument. And sometimes you'll find a flute that has 2 hanko, these hash marks burned into it. This one's got 3. And what I really love about it is that there's one right up here, right by the thumb hole, and it's almost worn away from all these years of first the Japanese master playing it. Someone's thumb has been there playing it for, almost 100 years, which I think is pretty cool. Okay, let me show you another piece. This is another one of the unaccompanied pieces from the times of the monks and the early part of the samurai era. And this is the first piece that I played on a concert in public, which did not go well, but it is one of my favorite pieces nonetheless. It's called Azuma no Kyoku. Kyoku just means a work about, and Azuma is a place in the east of Japan. But it's hundreds of years old, and so people have kind of forgotten what this piece is about. And there are 3 backstories that are argued about. One is that since this was written, I thought, during the time of the great samurai wars, maybe this is a prisoner of war, and he's been taken captive, and he's longing for his home back in the East. The second is maybe this is a traveler wandering and lost and looking for home. And the third interpretation of it, the third story that some people will tell you about it, pertains to a single great battle in one of these wars when various warlords were fighting each other. And one of them conquered the eastern part of Japan and was standing on a cliff overlooking the territory he had conquered, and a rider came rushing up to tell him that his wife had been killed in the battle. And this is the music of this. So needless to say, from all those 3 stories, you'll see this is not very upbeat and cheerful music, but I think it's very beautiful in a very different way than we're used to hearing. So, Azuma no Kyoku. the traditional shakuhachi musicians, the monks who still play this in the temples and the people who still play this for just worship purposes will tell you that the piece I just played, they consider sort of a lighthearted, popular piece because it's not about God or, religion or the beauties of nature. So doesn't seem really lighthearted and popular to me, but that's okay. I also want to play another one of the really, really old pieces for you. This is another one of my favorites. This is one of the 3 oldest pieces that have been recovered. Choshi, the beginning piece, was one of them. Another one is called Daiwagaku. And then this one is called Mukaiji. And that means sea fog flute. And it's got a story that goes with it, as all these pieces do. And the story on this one is, it's a very old piece, so it's 1,000-year-old music at least. And we're talking about a Buddhist monk, and he's in his little boat on the ocean, and night falls, and fog comes down. He's lost in the fog, and it's dark, and he can't find his way to safety, and he knows he's done for. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, out of the darkness, there's not a light anywhere, all of a sudden he hears the sound of a shakuhachi. He hears this bamboo flute playing. And he says, must be a temple, because that's where they play shakuhachi. So I'm going to aim my little boat for right there and put it in there, and there'll be a temple there, and I'll find safety in the morning, but I'll be safe there, I'll be sure. So he paddled toward the sound of this sea fog flute, and sure enough, he came to shore, and he was able to beach his little boat and slept the night. Got up in the morning, ready to go up to the temple and thank the monk who was playing the music for him, and he looked around, and there was no building in sight. There was no sign of habitation, no people. He was just on this empty shore, but had somehow come to safety from this invisible flute. And he said, who was playing the flute? How did that happen? And I say to you, it's a Zen thing. There's no answer. Nobody knows. But anyway, it's an ancient piece. This is 1,000-year music, and I want you to think about an ocean or a lake or a pond with mist swirling around on it, and fog and darkness coming down, and just a real sense of stillness. So there you are, floating in the middle of a deep, dark ocean, and you hear that. So I want to show you a little bit more of the very traditional music, and then I want to show you kind of where it has developed into the 20th century. And I'm going to sort of abbreviate this piece for you because if I play the whole thing, it's about 20 minutes long. It's a piece called Sakuhachi. And, I was told you one of the main pieces, one of the main genres of pieces that they play has to do with the beauty of nature and natural things. And this is the nesting call of cranes. Cranes, the big bird. And cranes are thought to be a bird of good fortune in Japan. And this you start off with the voices of a male crane and a female crane. And then it gets a little more frantic. We'll pass over that part. And then you start hearing all kinds of little twiddly, chirpy, floopy little noises as the babies hatch. And then you hear little swoopy things as the babies learn to fly. And then as the babies finally fly away at the end, you hear peace and calm and acceptance as the mother and father crane, their life has been well lived, they have raised their children, so on and so forth. And the truth of the story, from an animal standpoint, as I understand it, is that cranes do indeed mate for life. They're one of those birds like swans that pairs up for a lifetime. So theoretically, this could be the life cycle of a single pair of cranes through their whole life. But anyway, you'll hear the shakuhachi making a few strange birdie sort of noises, and that's intentional. in the 20th century, a lot of different types of music have also been written. But one of the best-known composers for shakuhachi in the 20th century has written a lot of music for movies and stuff too. And his name is Rondo, Fukuda Rondo. And I'm going to play a couple of his pieces for you. And I think you can hear that this is now more tuneful to our ears. It sounds more like a tune you could whistle or you could sing. And if you're looking at the music, I mean, it still looks weirder than weird, right? Top to bottom, right to left. What the heck is she talking about music, right? But if you're up here looking at it in front of me, there are some markings on here that come directly out of Western music notation for speeding up and slowing down, and dynamic markings, and they're starting to pick up. By this time, this is written in the 20th century, so there's a fair Western influence on traditional Japanese music by now. But that said, there's no question it's Japanese, and you're going to hear that. This first one is called Kikyo Ginsu Kyoku, which I'm sure, as you all know, means Song of the Wanderer. And to me, again, this music always sounds very sort of sad to me. So it's a lonely wanderer. So you can hear it's got a little Western flavor to it. The phrases end where you think they're going to end, and the song ends where you think it's going to end. And it makes a little more sense to Western ears, I think. And the other one of his that I wanted to play before I see if you guys have any other questions is a piece called Gecko Roteki, which has nothing to do with insurance or lizards. It means flute in the moonlight. and it looks like this. You can play that, right? Yeah. Excellent. Just in case I get tired, you can finish for me. Questions? Yes, ma'am. I was in Japan. Yeah, I bought this instrument in Japan. No, that's not true. That's a lie. I bought my first good shakuhachi in Japan from the maker. And I still have that flute. But 8 or 10 years later, this one came on the market. And this is just such a good flute. And it was one of the other shakuhachi players in New York City who had this flute. So I bought it from him. So, but I have spent a fair amount of time in Japan. I made 4 trips there, shakuhachi-related trips, played at some festivals and a bunch of temple things. And the shakuhachi makers are always delighted when shakuhachi players will come and you want to see their workshop, and they'll be happy to put out in front of you, the 20 best flutes they've made recently because they'd like you to buy one. But this one is made in Japan, as I said, many, long time ago, but actually bought in this country. Well, that I think is cool. That's with the maker's mark almost worn off here. I wonder what he would think if he knew, because when he made this flute, it was almost exclusively, and it still is, a really male-dominant instrument. Very few women play shakuhachi at the professional level, at the shihan, the master level. Maybe in this country, I bet there's not I bet there's not 100 women that play, and worldwide, I would think there's probably way less than 1,000 women that play at Shihan level, whereas the majority of them are men, and this comes about because of its history coming through Buddhist monks and samurai warriors, so yeah, it was a men's instrument. But I wonder what he would think, if he knows that it's, he played it and owned it, and then I think one of the Japanese masters had it for 20 years or so, and then my colleague in New York got it, and then I got it. But what would he think if he knew that not only was a woman playing it, it's a Western woman? That's shocking. Too bad. Anybody else? Yeah. It makes you wonder how. That's what it's for. That's all those things. That's what it's for. I mean, it was the original meditation for Zen Buddhism. That's what it was written for. And even the more contemporary music still draws on that tradition. I kind of wonder, though, if it's all these broken-hearted love songs and this very meditative. I wonder why there's so many Japanese. If they're all, don't they ever write any happy love songs? Or I've never played a happy love song, and I've never run into one. So. I don't know, but most Asian traditions carry a pentatonic scale, carry a 5-tone scale, and I guess if you track it back, you've got to track it back, through Asia, through India, and probably into Persia and the ancient Middle East. That's probably where it started from, because a lot of those traditional Middle Eastern instruments are pentatonic also. So I guess that's where it came from.
So was our diatonic, how do they relate? I mean, they sound like two different races, how did they meet?
You got me. Paul, you got any idea? No, Paul doesn't have an answer to that question either. I don't know. I do not know. But, our diatonic scale just fills in the gaps in the pentatonic scale. It's the half steps in between. It's the black. It puts the black keys on the piano, basically, so you have all those extra notes. But, when it developed or who started doing it first, I don't know. One thing I did discover when I was learning this and in my Sakuhachi journey, one thing, and I thought this was just a moment of amazing revelation, but I'll tell you why it really wasn't. But you learn this music, like I showed you, this stuff, the ensemble music, and this is a very short piece. I mean, these pieces are like 20, 25 minutes long sometimes, and these pieces are spread out. You spread them out across the table, and you kind of have to do choreography to walk along and play them. But it's weird harmonies. The Japanese music doesn't have the same kind of harmonies that we're used to hearing until I really got where I could play this instrument more in tune and hear these harmonies, and suddenly I realized that these chords, these harmonies were changing as you went through this long piece. Every time it would change into a different key, it was going around something that musicians call the circle of fifths, which is a chord progression that we're all used to in the music world and makes music sound like music to us, all right? And I thought, oh my God, this is a wonderful thing. Look, the circle of fifths, here it is 1,000 years back, clear across the world, and they're still, we're still doing it, and all humanity is one, and I had this moment of great revelation. And so I thought, no, wait a minute, because the earliest musical instruments were probably string instruments. And a lot of the intervals that we've all learned to hear have to do with what happens when you pluck a string, and then you shorten it and you pluck it, it makes a different noise, right? So here you have a string, you pluck it, it goes bloop, and then you divide it in half and it goes in a different bloop, and that takes you in the circle of fifths. So this is not so much a great revelation about all humanity having one linked artistic background, and is a realization that physics and mathematics basically are the same all the way around the globe. So that doesn't really answer your question, but it's close. It's in the family. So, anybody else? Nobody wants to know my favorite question? I haven't gotten asked yet. Okay, all right. Where the hell did you learn? Why did you want to learn this instrument? Was my favorite one. What made you do this? So, and I went to visit friends in Japan before I had my hands on a shakuhachi. And they said, oh, well, what are you going to do with Nora while she's here? Well, we'll send her with a friend of ours who is studying shakuhachi. You can go to her shakuhachi and see a Japanese flute lesson. Cool. So I go to this Japanese flute lesson, and I still don't speak any Japanese, and the instructor spoke no English, but somehow they'd gotten Philadelphia through to him, and he thought I played flute in the Philadelphia Orchestra, so he thought I was like, a real big shot that had come to see his little studio. So it was like about 30 guys in suits, the Japanese salarymen, and they were all taking shakuhachi lessons. And this one Canadian woman that I was accompanying. So the teacher gave me a shakuhachi and a packet of music. It's all in Japanese, I still have it, and kind of put me off in a corner of the room all by my little self to see if I could figure out how to make a sound on it. All right, they're incredibly hard to make a sound on the first time. I have yet to meet anybody who could just pick one up and do it. So I spent an hour and a half in a room full of Japanese people who were taking their shakuhachi lesson behind me over in the corner going, trying to make a sound. At the end of it, at the end of the lesson, I finally got one note to come out, and the whole classroom full of nice little Japanese men turned up and applauded and bowed to me. So that was my first experience. And then I thought, it's too much work. I'm not going to do that. And then a couple of years later, I was playing in New York at the New York Flute Fest, and there was a workshop on international flutes. So I went to hear it because I had a gap in my schedule, and the guy who was playing it was just marvelous, and it sounded great. And so I went up to him afterwards and hooked up with him and started taking lessons with him. So, okay, let me show you one thing real quick here. Just proof that you can play the shakuhachi and melodies you guys totally recognize. I'll give you two back to back. Japanese cherry blossoms, right? And here's what happens when you turn a shakuhachi loose on some Western music. So there you are. For those of you who wanted to know what the heck the shakuhachi was in my bio and what it was all about, now you know. And anybody have any last questions? It's a different kind of note. Those were all pure notes where you could cover the whole hole or the whole hole or the entire hole was open. A lot of the notes in the other music were half holes, like on a recorder. And also, that's the way you make the changes in the pitch on the shakuhachi. You cover half a hole or you change the air direction, and it also changes the sound quality. Yeah. And right, I have not developed a tick or anything since the last time I was here. It's a pitch thing. And to go up and down, to get the black notes, you change your air direction by changing your head position, and you partially cover the holes, and that changes the quality of the notes. But in Amazing Grace, that arrangement's written in all whole tones, all open notes. So, you're welcome. Well, thank you guys for listening. Thank you. I think I'll see you guys again in December. I think it's a Christmas program in December.
We will definitely see you again soon.
Not in Sakuhachi, okay?
Nora, this was so special and so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us. What an amazing instrument. Yes. I feel like I learned so much, and I thoroughly enjoyed that, as I'm sure you did as well. Can we give her another round of applause? Thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you for coming out tonight. Have a great rest of your evening, and I'll see you soon.
Yeah. Sakuhachi, have to remember how to say it.
That's it. You got it right.
Shakuhachi.
Good. You did
Shakuhachi. See, I'm not a chicken.
it. See, you did it good. Sayonara. That's right. Let's keep the spirit. Oh, you're very welcome. Weird, right?
You can play that.
Oh, yeah.
You can read it.
I can. In fact, I can take my regular flute nowadays, and I can read that, and I can play it on Western flute.
I just wanted to see the mouth.
Very enjoyable.
So you blow
You put,
across.
this fits under here, and you blow cross, and you're
Just like
aiming
a regular
just like a regular flute.
flute.
It's different because it's bigger,